The days following Anjali's exhibition were filled with quiet amazement. Her art had been featured in a small column in the Jaipur Arts Review, and invitations began trickling in from local galleries. For the first time, her name stood not just beside Rohan's, but on its own. Anjali Sharma, artist. Rohan couldn't have been prouder. Every morning, he would find her sitting by the window, sketching as sunlight streamed in, her fingers moving gracefully across the canvas. He would bring her tea, quietly admiring her focus. "You know," he said one morning, leaning against the doorframe, "if you keep this up, the whole country will know your name." She smiled without looking up. "That's not what I want," she said softly. "I just want to paint without guilt, without feeling like I have to choose between duty and myself." Rohan walked over and gently tilted her chin toward him. "You don't have to choose anymore. We'll make both work together." Anjali's next opportunity came sooner than expected. A well-known gallery in Delhi invited her to display her paintings in a group exhibition for emerging artists. She was both thrilled and terrified. "Delhi is far," she whispered when she read the invitation letter. "And your family, I'll handle them," Rohan interrupted firmly. "They'll understand someday. And even if they don't, we'll go anyway." Anjali looked at him with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. No one had ever defended her dreams so fiercely before. They traveled to Delhi by train, a journey of long talks, laughter, and shared silence as the scenery rushed by outside. Rohan watched her sketch the hills and rivers through the window, and he realized how deeply her art reflected her soul. She paints the world, he thought, but somehow she paints us too. The gallery was bustling with people on the opening night, artists, critics, journalists, and curious visitors. Anjali stood nervously beside her paintings, her heart pounding. Rohan stayed close, his presence a steady calm. "Remember," he whispered, "you belong here." When the curator introduced her to a group of critics, Anjali's voice trembled at first. But as she began explaining her work, the colors, the emotions, the stories behind each piece, her confidence grew. Her words flowed like paint on a fresh canvas. One of the critics, an older woman with kind eyes, said, "Your paintings speak of balance between tradition and independence. They carry the warmth of old India and the strength of the new." Anjali's eyes glistened. "That's exactly what I wanted them to feel," she said softly. By the end of the evening, several pieces had sold. The curator promised to feature her again. And when she saw Rohan beaming at her from across the room, she knew that this was more than success. It was freedom earned through love. Back in Jaipur, not everyone shared their joy. Rohan's mother, Mrs. Sharma, greeted them with restrained politeness. "You were in Delhi for art?" she asked, emphasizing the last word as if it were a frivolous thing. "Yes, Ma," Rohan said calmly. Anjali's work was part of an exhibition. It went beautifully. Mrs. Sharma sighed. "That's good, but people are talking." A married woman traveling for shows, speaking to strangers. "Ma," Rohan interrupted, keeping his voice respectful but firm, "people will always talk. But I'd rather they talk about her success than about how he stopped her from living her dream. There was silence. Anjali stood quietly, her hands trembling slightly. But when Rohan placed his hand on hers, the tremor stopped. Mrs. Sharma said nothing more. She turned and walked away slowly. For now, silence was enough. As the months passed, Anjali's career continued to grow. She began teaching art classes for local girls, many of whom had never been encouraged to paint before. Rohan, inspired by her passion, helped her set up a small studio in town, a bright, airy space filled with canvases, brushes, and laughter. They called it Nai Rang, new colors. One evening, as they stood outside the studio, watching the sunset, Rohan said quietly, "Do you realize what you've done, Anjali? You're changing things, not just for yourself, but for all of them." She smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "No, we are changing things. You believed in me when no one else did." Rohan shook his head. "You would have done it anyway. I just made sure the world saw you." One night, as rain poured outside, Anjali and Rohan sat together in the courtyard, sipping chai. The sound of raindrops against the tiles created a rhythm, calm and intimate. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Marrying me, breaking traditions, defending me against your family?" He looked at her, surprised. "Regret it? Never. You've given my life meaning beyond what I ever imagined. You taught me that love isn't about control, it's about growth." Anjali smiled, tears glimmering. "And you taught me that tradition doesn't have to kill dreams. It can evolve with us. Then let's keep evolving. Together." The rain fell harder, and they laughed, running to the veranda. As thunder rolled in the distance, Anjali realized that love, like art, was never static. It changed, it challenged, it healed. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the storm. Anjali and Rohan have now built something deeper than love, a partnership of equals, balancing tradition and individuality. But the world outside their small circle hasn't fully accepted their change yet. The monsoon faded, leaving behind clear skies and the scent of wet earth. For Anjali and Rohan, life had settled into a rhythm: work, laughter, art, and shared dreams. Their studio, Nai Rang, had become a beacon for young women who came to learn, to express, and to breathe in a world that often told them to stay silent. But peace rarely lasts long when change challenges tradition. One morning, a newspaper arrived at their doorstep with Anjali's photograph on the front page. The headline read, "Local Artist Breaks Barriers. Women in Art Find a Voice in Jaipur." Her smile lit up the page, but Rohan noticed her hands tremble slightly as she held it. "They've written about the studio," she whispered. "They called it revolutionary." He smiled. "Because it is." But within hours, the same word, revolutionary, spread like wildfire, twisting in tone. By afternoon, whispers turned into gossip. Some neighbors frowned when Anjali passed by. At the market, two older women muttered under their breath. A married woman, running a studio? Teaching girls to paint? What next? Rohan heard them, but said nothing. He knew words couldn't change minds that refused to see. But the pressure grew when his uncle visited that evening, his expression stern. Anjali's eyes softened. "Thank you, Ma." No more words were needed. Acceptance had begun, quiet, hesitant, but real. That night, Rohan and Anjali stood on the terrace, watching lanterns drift into the night sky for Diwali. "Do you think they'll ever truly understand?" Anjali asked. Rohan looked up at the glowing lights. "Maybe not all, but we didn't start this to be understood. We started it to be true." She leaned into him, their hands intertwined. Around them, the city glittered with celebration, fireworks painting the sky, colors bursting like freedom itself. And as the lights reflected in her eyes, Anjali whispered, "Then let's keep being true." Rohan smiled. "Always." The night was alive with light, laughter, and a promise that even in a world of walls, love would keep finding ways to paint new doors. Anjali and Rohan's love has inspired a movement, but fame and change have a price. Their world is shifting. Acceptance is beginning, but so are new responsibilities. Months passed, and Jaipur began to change in quiet ways. The once rare sight of girls walking toward Nai Rang with sketchbooks tucked under their arms had become normal. The laughter that echoed through the studio spilled into the streets, softening the walls of silence that had surrounded many homes. Anjali stood by the window one morning, looking at the group of students painting in the courtyard. Her heart swelled with pride. The studio had become more than a place for art. It was a sanctuary for freedom, for stories, for unspoken dreams. Rohan entered the room, holding a letter in his hand, his face unreadable. "What's that?" Anjali asked, sensing something important. He handed it to her. "A letter from the National Art Foundation. They want you to represent India in an international art residency in Paris." Her breath caught. "Paris? That's across the world." He nodded slowly. "It's for 6 months. They'll sponsor everything. It's the opportunity of a lifetime." That evening, they sat together on the terrace, the stars bright above them. The sounds of Jaipur drifted in the background, bells, laughter, distant songs. Anjali's mind was racing. "I should be happy, but," she hesitated. "How can I leave everything we've built here? The studio, the girls, and you?" Rohan took her hand gently. "Anjali, this is your dream. Everything you've worked for has led here. You've shown the world what you can do. Now the world is calling back." "But what about you?" she asked softly. "About us?" He smiled faintly. "Love isn't a cage. If it keeps you from flying, it's not love, it's fear. And I'm not afraid of losing you. I'm afraid of you losing yourself." Her eyes filled with tears. "Rohan," he placed a hand on her cheek. "Go. Paint the world. And when you come back, we'll keep building ours." The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation and emotion. Anjali trained one of her students, Meera, to lead the classes in her absence. She left the studio keys with trembling hands and whispered, "Take care of them and of yourself." The day of her departure, the station was filled with well-wishers, students, friends, even neighbors who once criticized her. Mrs. Sharma stood quietly behind them all, holding a small tiffin box.
Ma,
Anjali asked softly. Mrs. Sharma smiled, her eyes warm for the first time. It's sweet rice. For your journey. You'll do great things, Beti. Anjali's throat tightened. She touched her mother-in-law's feet respectfully, and Mrs. Sharma rested a hand on her head, a silent blessing. When the train whistle blew, Rohan helped her with the bags, then stood by the window as she leaned out. 6 months, she whispered. Promise you'll write? Every day, he replied. And when you see the Eiffel Tower, remember, you built something taller than that here. The train began to move. She reached for his hand until their fingers slipped apart, the space between them growing with every second. Paris was everything Anjali had imagined and more. Bustling streets, art galleries, music, and colors unlike anything she had seen. Yet amid the beauty, there was a strange ache in her heart. Every sunset reminded her of Jaipur's warm glow. Every painting she made carried traces of home. Her art evolved. She painted a series called Threads of Two Worlds, a blend of Indian warmth and European light. The pieces told stories of women balancing love and independence, family and dreams. Critics called it a revolution in color and emotion. At night, she read Rohan's letters. They came regularly, written in his careful, loving handwriting. The studio misses you, but Mira is doing well. Your students ask about you every day. I miss your laughter echoing through these walls. But I'm proud of you, Anjali. Every sunrise here feels like your art, alive, brave, beautiful. Sometimes she cried while reading them. Other times she smiled through her tears, painting late into the night. Months later, the residency culminated in an international exhibition. Anjali's paintings drew crowds. Her name appeared in magazines and newspapers across continents. A famous art critic wrote, Anjali Sharma's work transcends borders. It speaks the language of love and liberation. During the event, a curator approached her. We'd like to offer you a full-time position here in Paris, he said. You could teach, exhibit, travel. You'd be among the best. The room seemed to fade. Paris had opened its arms, but her heart was still in Jaipur. That night, she stood by the Seine, watching the reflections of lights dance on the water. Her phone buzzed. It was a video message from Rohan. He was standing in Nai Rang, surrounded by her students. We're proud of you, he said. But remember, the colors of home will always wait for you. Anjali smiled through tears. The decision was clear. When she arrived at Jaipur station 6 months later, the city was alive with color, literally. Banners of her paintings hung along the streets. Nai Rang had grown into a larger space, bustling with students. Rohan stood waiting, a single marigold garland in his hands. You didn't have to welcome me like this, she laughed through tears. He grinned. I didn't. They did. Behind him, dozens of girls held up handmade signs. Welcome home, Anjali ma'am. Our inspiration. Our artist, our teacher. Anjali's heart swelled. She ran to Rohan and hugged him tightly, the world disappearing around them. "I turned down Paris," she whispered. "Home is here, with you with them." He pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. "You didn't have to choose. You brought the world back with you." Years later, Nei Rang became one of India's most respected art institutes for women. Girls who once feared picking up a brush now taught others. Anjali and Rohan worked side by side, she teaching art, he managing exhibitions and community programs. Their partnership had become a symbol of progress, featured in magazines and documentaries. During the 10th anniversary of Nei Rang, a reporter asked Anjali, "What do you think your greatest achievement is?" Anjali smiled, looking at the walls filled with paintings by her students. "That they no longer need to ask permission to dream." Rohan placed his arm around her shoulders, whispering, "And that you never stopped painting the world brighter." That night, as they walked home through the lantern-lit streets of Jaipur, Anjali looked up at the sky. "So much has changed," she said softly. Rohan nodded. "Yes, but some things never should, like love that grows with freedom." They walked hand in hand, their shadows stretching together under the warm glow of the city. Two souls who had learned that the truest art was not painted on canvas, but written in the choices that set them free. A story that began with duty and ended with choice. Anjali and Rohan didn't just build a marriage, they built a movement. Their love became a legacy. The years flowed gently, like paint blending into water, soft, inevitable, and full of memory. Nei Rang had become more than an art school. It was a movement, a symbol, a living story passed down from one generation to the next. On any given morning, laughter echoed through its corridors as girls painted bright skies, red saris, and golden sunsets. At the far end of the main hall, framed in glass, hung a single painting, Anjali's first work, the one she had created as a young bride struggling to find her place in the world. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "Freedom begins with the courage to dream." Anjali sat by the window of their old home, now surrounded by blooming marigolds and jasmine vines. Her hair had silvered, her movements slower, but her eyes still carried the same spark that once painted revolutions in color. Rohan entered quietly, holding 2 cups of chai. His hair was streaked with gray, his face lined by years, but his smile, that steady, knowing smile, hadn't changed. "You still paint every morning," he said, handing her the cup. She smiled. "And you still watch me every morning." He chuckled softly. "Old habits die hard." They sat together, watching the students through the window. A young teacher, Mira, now a confident woman in her 30s, was guiding a group of girls, her voice clear and warm. "She's wonderful," Rohan said. "You chose well." Anjali nodded. "She reminds me of who I was. Afraid at first, then unstoppable." That afternoon, a journalist arrived to interview Anjali for a documentary on women who changed modern India. She was hesitant. She never sought fame, but Rohan encouraged her. The young woman set up her camera and asked gently, "Mrs. Sharma, when you look back, what do you see?" Anjali thought for a long moment. Her eyes wandered to the studio courtyard, where students were laughing under the sun. "I see colors," she said finally. "Not just on canvas, but in life. When I was young, everything was painted in black and white. What women could or couldn't do, who they could or couldn't be. I just wanted to show that life was never meant to be one shade." The interviewer smiled. "And what about love? What role did it play in your journey?" Anjali's gaze softened as she looked toward Rohan, who was arranging books on a nearby shelf. "Love," she said slowly, "is the color that makes all others visible. Without it, even the brightest paint fades." The interviewer grew quiet, touched. The room felt full of warmth, not from fame, but from truth. Weeks later, Nairang held its 25th anniversary exhibition. Alumni from all over India returned, their own students beside them, filling the gallery with art and laughter. Mira gave the opening speech, her voice trembling slightly. 25 years ago, one woman decided that art was not rebellion, but freedom. She painted doors where walls once stood. Today, we walk through those doors because of her. When the applause began, Anjali, sitting in the front row beside Rohan, looked overwhelmed. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Rohan reached for her hand and whispered, "You see, you didn't just teach art. You taught the world how to breathe." Later that night, when the hall was empty, Anjali walked slowly along the rows of paintings. Each canvas told a story of strength, of womanhood, of hope. She paused before a small portrait, a young girl holding a paintbrush, her eyes full of dreams. "Who painted this?" she asked. Mira smiled. "One of the youngest students. She said it's called Anjali Ma'am's Light." Anjali's lips trembled. "Oh, it's beautiful." Rohan placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's you as they see you, not as tradition defined you, but as the world remembers you." That night, after the celebration, Anjali returned to her private studio. The moonlight poured in through the window as she took out a fresh canvas, blank, waiting. She hadn't painted for herself in a long time. Slowly, she began to move her brush, the strokes light but steady. Rohan entered quietly. "A new project?" She smiled faintly, without turning. "A goodbye." He stepped closer, watching as colors emerged, gold, red, and blue. A woman standing before an open door, light spilling through it, her face calm and free. "It's called The Door We Opened," Anjali said softly. "Our story." Rohan placed his hand over hers. "Then let's finish it together." They painted side by side, as they had lived, two souls blending color, laughter, and silence into something timeless. Years later, Nairang would still stand, bigger, brighter, filled with art and stories. A statue of Anjali and Rohan at the entrance, holding a paintbrush together, welcomed every visitor. Generations of girls would learn their story, not as a tale of rebellion, but of love that redefined what tradition could be. Every year, on the anniversary of the studio, Mira would tell her students, "Remember, art is not just paint on canvas. It's the courage to be seen. And love Love is the color that never fades. In the courtyard, beneath the shade of an old neem tree, stood the original easel, Anjali's first. It was worn, the wood soft with age, but still used by new students. On its side, carved faintly but clearly, were the words Rohan had once whispered years ago. Together, we make the world brighter. And somewhere, in the rhythm of brushes, in the laughter of students, in the colors dancing across the walls, Anjali and Rohan lived on, forever part of the masterpiece they created together. They began as strangers bound by duty. They ended as partners who painted freedom into tradition.